Alright, so here is our current setup that we are replacing today. This pump does not work. This is a Hayward Super Pump. You can see the plumbing in front is 1.5 inches with the unions. Basically, we're going to cut this out and we are going to plumb in the new one. Back here is the power. We have to first make sure the power is turned off completely. I'm going to verify that with a multimeter or voltage meter. I'm going to make sure that the breaker is turned off, and I'm going to verify by checking to make sure there is no stray voltage or anything like that. And then we're going to cut this one out and put the new one in. So I loosened the unions on the plumbing and I took the whole pump off. Normally I would do this at the pad site, but because this had unions, I was able to disconnect it, bring it up a little bit higher. So now I'm going to disconnect the electrical. This has a different plug, but I'm going to come back in here, disconnect the electrical from here. So what I need to do is undo these screws in the back. Usually just use a standard nut driver and loosen these screws all the way. And I'm going to pull this back panel off. Sometimes they're not. So I pull this off, making sure I don't lose these nuts. All right, and then here are my connections. Again, I've made sure that they're not connected to anything. The plug's off, so I know for sure they are. And here's my ground wire. Here's line in 1, line 2. These are both hot, so I'm going to use my nut driver again, and I can disconnect here, or I could simply, in this application, undo these wing nuts and pull it off that way. Undo the ground. Alright, it's really important if you're taking these off that you do not back them all the way out. They're tapered in a way that you don't want to back them all the way out. These two for line 1, line 2. Alright, through. Pull this right through. Now my power's out. I've got my 2 power wires and I've got my ground there. And that's it. I will put the cap back on this, and this pump is done, and I'll put the new one in. Alright. Alright, so usually before I connect the pump to plumbing, I like to hook up the power first. I always make sure the breaker's off, and I double check it with a multimeter. Make sure that I'm not messing with wires that are live and that are going to shock me. In this case, it's unplugged. This is a different type. So I'm going to hook it up. I took this piece here off the other pump. I thread this in first. This is going to make it a watertight connection, and then I thread these wires through. In this scenario, green is my ground, and then I've got my 2 live, my 2 legs coming in. So I'm going to feed these through. I usually like to start with my ground wire here. Alright, so I'm going to take my green and I'm going to thread it around. Alright, so I got my wire snips. I'm just going to give myself a little bit more wire to work with. Alright. Alright, so that's what I did. Make sure I can get it nice and twisted here, and I'll put it around this guy. Just like that. Okay, I'm going to make sure that it'll sit underneath. And I'm going to tighten this down. Alright, for the next 2, I've got my leg 1, or sorry, my line 1, my line 2. I'm going to connect one to each one of these. Again, this pump is only 220. This will not run 115, or sorry, 230. It will not run 115. Okay, so we need to make sure that we have 230 coming into it. And we set it up just like we do any other pump. Line in. I want to make sure I actually do get a really good connection here. There we go. So line 1 We'll put that in. It's in there, make sure it's snug, and we'll tighten it down in a second. Line 2, open her up. All right, and so we'll push these guys in, make sure we've got good contact. We'll tighten it down so these guys don't move, making sure that they're not moving and that they can't touch each other. I've got good connection there, good connection there, and we're good. So this comes with the in the box. All right, it's my cover for that part. I told you I like from the beginning, I like that it was already disconnected. I didn't have to fool with it. All right, and now all I'm gonna do is take that gasket and I just feed it in place. You can kind of tell which way it goes. The writing goes up. All right, and then I'm gonna take one of my screws and simply put it in. I can kind of use my hands actually get it started. All right, that one's in. I like that it's got a little gasket there, and actually I like how this whole thing's on the side, really easy. I didn't feel like it was super tight. Mind you, this whole, it's nice that this whole thing comes off, and that's not always the case. So I could move it to a deck and work on it. That's not always the case. Sometimes we're in a tight spot, and it's nice that it's like that. So let's go install this bad boy, and let's get ready to rock. All right, so we pulled this out of the box, and we want to drop this right in place. So we're going to line it up and get a look. We're going to connect this up to this one with a coupler here, and we're going to connect it down, and then we're going to connect to this little piece here. We're going to try to give it a little more run, but if you look closely here, we are actually a little bit higher than this pipe. So what we can do is take this orange part off the base, and that'll lower it down, and that's actually the exact height for a super pump. So that's what we need to do. Take off those screws there and lower it down, and then we will be ready to plumb it in. Yeah, and then now looks like we're right about perfect here. We might be a little low, but we'll figure it out. We'll get it taken care of. Make sure we're good to go. Awesome. All right, so I've got it lined up now. I'm gonna pay extra attention because this pipe right here is old. I'm gonna pay a lot of attention to getting it really clean, getting the dirt off of it, making sure it's really good application site. I actually use my knife to bevel it a little bit so it will help the glue spread evenly around. And so again, I just spend extra time focusing on getting it clean, getting all the dirt and stuff off. Both sides with pipe cleaner or primer, both sides. All right, so again, now I've got my glue open. I'll come back through and wet these with the primer again. Make sure they're nice and wet and primed up and clean. Really good all the way in. All right, now I'm gonna give it a nice good coat of glue all the way around. I turn my pipe. I don't wanna go too heavy here, but just a nice even coat. And here's the most important part. I always go labels down. I'm gonna push it in and give it a turn and then hold it. These pipes are angled and they will push themselves out. So if you don't hold this, it'll naturally want to push itself out. In the summer, about 20 seconds. In the winter, maybe a little longer because it'll take some time for this to set up. I always like to do labels facing down so you don't see all the writing. Just makes it look a little prettier. Now I'm going to put my connection piece on. I'm using the 1.5 inch connection piece, which I've talked about how much I love that they provide this. And I'm going to do a good amount of cleaner and primer on both sides of the pipe. All right, focusing on keeping them nice and wet while I put the glue on. I do a little glue Sometimes I get a little extra and I wipe that off, but making sure that I get a nice amount of glue in, and then I'm gonna push this thing in and give it a turn, and I'm gonna hold this piece for about 30 seconds. Again, trying to keep the glue out of everything, and if I get glue on something like I just did, I was sloppy with that one, I'm gonna wipe it off as to not mess everything up. And if you can look closely inside, you can see that it butts right up, and that's kind of what we're looking for. Now, here's the super important part. When I go to glue these in, it's so important that I put this part on before I glue it. If I don't, and I glue this in place, this will not thread on. Your SOL, you have to cut it out and do it again. So I always put it on first. I'm gonna prime these two up, get them nice and primed or nice and cleaned, right? I'm gonna make sure I get my primer all the way deep in there, because again, PVC glue is not actually, you're not going on the adhesive part. We're going based on the chemical reaction to fuse these into one piece. I'm gonna try to go a little light with the glue here, but I do wanna make sure I still get a good amount of coverage. I always putting, this brush is not great, so I'm putting way too much on. All right, so I'm gonna go in just like before, make sure that I could get it turned down. You saw how it wanted to push it out right away. Did you see that? Pushes it right out. And that's again, partially because I have a lot of glue on there. And I hold this in place until she dries. And then we do the top. All right, now I'm working on the top piece, the part that goes from the pump to the filter. I had a little give in this, so I did turn it up a little bit upward, so I'm not pushing up. I can actually push down, which, you know, I'm a little bit stronger. Again, because this is old pipe, I'm gonna make sure I clean it up real good. Put primer all over this part, all over this part. All right, really good. Time for some glue, baby. Over glue, but I come back with a rag, and usually I keep a rag close by and I wipe it off. Do my little corner turn. I want to make sure that this label is going to face away, and I'm going to hold it in place for as long as possible. So now that I've got my coupler in place, I always like to do this first because this will come apart. So I do this first. Now I'm going to measure the distance between how far it'll go in. So usually right about that line and the base of this. And I want to be really precise here. So I have 14 and 5/8 roughly. I'm going to cut a pipe that length, and I'm going to glue it in place to here and then attach the two. It's always easier, like I said, to do it this way because this part comes off. So you can glue it and then slide it in place. It's much easier to do it that way versus trying to, it's like trying to parallel park a car this big into a space this big. It's really difficult. Making my cut, I initially cut this and I was about, you know, 1/4 of an inch and 1/2 inch off. Need to shave a little bit off. I like to use a one-handed DeWalt Atomic Sawzall. I've tried other brands in the past. I like this one the best. I get the most accurate cut with it. Shout out DeWalt, come see me. And I'm gonna line this thing up. I'm gonna get a beautiful cut here. Slow and steady wins the race. Woo! Pull off all my stuff. Now, I don't like this edge rough. So I usually take my knife and I like to just run it along this edge here to get a little bevel and cut off any rough parts. And then I take my grinder or a little sander after, and I'll sand it down to get it nice and smooth, kind of get a little angle on it. I think it helps to disperse the glue a little bit better and helps the glue to spread evenly around it. Just to make sure I'm on. Oh. Right on, perfect. All right, now, gonna primer it up. Prime it up. Both parts. Again, before you put this on, you always double check and make absolute sure that you have both parts of the union on there. Otherwise, you're in big trouble. All right, so put a little glue in both parts, all the way around. Put it in and turn and make sure I get to the very bottom of it, and I just hold her in place. All right, so once again, I had a little give in this pipe here, so I turned it up, make it a little easier to fit. I generally don't recommend doing this, but I'm gonna redo those connections there anyway, so I'm not too concerned about it. But generally, just be careful. And the reason I did this was to give myself some room to work. Again, pushing it down instead of trying to, like I said, parallel park in between a really tight space. A little glue on both sides. I really hate this glue applicator, but once again, always make sure that you've got that threaded piece as part of the connection on before you glue this in place. Otherwise, you're SOL. It will not go on after. You'll have to cut it off, put a union in, or sorry, put a coupler in, and couplers look sloppy. You don't want a coupler in there. All right, so you can hear it running. It's running great. Nice and quiet. Just priming up right now. Priming up. I've got it on recirculate, so no big deal. But all in all, the install is pretty easy. Cut, put your connectors in. I ended up adding a union up there to make it easier for service later. Pretty easy stuff. So setup on this thing's really easy. You select speed 1. It's showing you time, which is 8 a.m. So we want it to start at 8, and we hit that 8 a.m. 8 a.m.'s good. Duration, how many hours do we want to run it? Okay, so let's say we want to run it for 3 hours, 4 hours, something like that. So I'll go up to 4 hours. All right, so 4 hours. I had already set it to 3,000. All right, so it's, I don't know, it's kind of hard to tell. So how many do you want it? So it's going to be 3,000 RPMs. We can change it up if we want. Doesn't matter. So then next speed, so it's going to start at 8 a.m. and it's going to run for 4 hours. Then I'm going to go to speed 2. I'm going to set speed 2 for, say, 1750, so I can change it to 1750. And since we ran this one for 4 hours, it's automatically going to default to the next time. It'll automatically kick on to speed 2 after 4 hours. And it'll tell me how long, and I want it for, say, 10 hours. That's what it says now, 10 hours. It's hard to tell, but it says 10 hours. And then I go to speed 3, and I want to set speed 3. It's default for 2,500. I want to set it to, say, 2,700. So I just use the arrows, go to 2,700. Don't know if you can see, but it says 2,700, and then we're going to hit it again. How many hours? I want this to run it for 24 hours. So this one was 4 hours, this one's 10, and I'll do this one for 10 as well. And this pump will run around the clock 24/7. Super easy. And now to start it up, I'm going to hit 1, and there we go. I start her up. She's super quiet. She's catching prime. Really easy. She's very quiet. Water's coming in. Good to go. Good to go.